The morning after my wife passed away, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Her name is Samantha. My stepdaughter. The girl I had raised like my own since she was 5. I had been there for scraped knees, for first days of school, for heartbreaks no one else noticed, for late night cries in the dark. I thought I was her father in every sense of the word. I thought love would be enough to hold us together forever. I was wrong. My name is Robert Harrison, and I'm 68 years old. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And comment below where you're watching from. Because if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, this story will hit home. I married Helen when I was 40. She brought Samantha with her. A shy, withdrawn little girl who didn't trust men. Her mother told me once, "Robert, she's scared of being hurt again." I promised myself, I'll show her love. I'll be the family she never had. And I kept that promise. I attended every recital, every school play, every soccer game. I drove her to practices, helped with homework, celebrated her victories like they were my own. I saved for her college tuition, even dreamed of helping her with her first wedding someday. Never once asking for gratitude. Because family doesn't keep score. Or at least, that's what I believed. Helen and I built a life together. A home filled with laughter, music, and quiet evenings. Shared dreams whispered in the dark. Moments that didn't need words. When Helen passed, I thought grief would bring us closer. I thought Samantha would cling to me for comfort. I thought our bond was unbreakable. I was wrong. The first sign came quietly. One morning, after the funeral, Samantha walked into the living room. Calm. Collected. Smiling too brightly. "Uncle Robert," she said softly, "we need to talk about the house." My heart sank. "The house?" I asked carefully. "Yes," she said. "Mom wanted everything to be fair. And now it's time to make some decisions." I nodded slowly. Decisions about what? She smiled like she was discussing groceries. And then, she started removing family photographs from the walls. Pictures of Helen. Pictures of me. Pictures of us together. My heart dropped with every frame she touched. "This is temporary," she said. Not a trace of apology. Not a flicker of remorse. Just organizing things. But I knew better. I had raised her. I had seen this look before. This wasn't organizing. This was erasing. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. She rearranged furniture. Moved my chair from the study into a corner. Shifted decorations Helen and I had chosen together. She even told my friends I was too tired to handle the house. Planting seeds of doubt. Whispering lies. Slowly rewriting the story of my life. One evening, I sat in the kitchen. The smell of Helen's favorite coffee cup lingered. The grief I carried felt heavier. Not just because I lost her, but because someone I trusted was trying to erase me while I was still alive. "I raised you like my own," I whispered to the empty room. "How could you do this?" And that's when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't powerless. Samantha's mistake wasn't malice alone. It was underestimating me. She thought grief made me weak. She thought I'd be pushed aside. I began observing her. Every word. Every gesture. Every friendly suggestion, that was really a command. I started taking notes. I tracked every overreach. Every small act of arrogance. I did nothing outwardly. No shouting. No confrontation. Because revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with patience. With knowing your own worth. With waiting. Days turned into weeks. Samantha's attempts grew bolder. She moved my books. Rearranged my personal items. Refused to cook meals in the kitchen if I was nearby. She was carving out a world, without me. And yet I stayed calm. One afternoon, she approached me while I was reading in the living room. "You're no longer needed in family decisions," she said sharply. Her tone cold. precise. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I smiled. "You're underestimating me," I said quietly. Her face flickered. A hesitation I had never seen. It lasted only a moment. But I caught it. That flicker was all I needed. I began quietly planning my move. Not from anger. Not for revenge. But to remind her, and the rest of the family, who I really was. I started documenting everything. Every word. Every action. Every overstep. I stayed silent to everyone, even friends. Because patience is a weapon. People who try to erase someone always leave a trail. One evening, Samantha attempted something bold. She tried to redesign the garden I had built with Helen. Claimed it was her turn. I smiled to myself. She had no idea. Every overconfidence, every misstep, every arrogant move was leading me to reclaim my life. That night, I opened a wooden box Helen and I had hidden away. Letters. Photographs. Mementos. Proof of my love. Proof of my presence. Proof of my place in this home. And in that moment I knew. The little girl I raised like my own had no idea that the father she was trying to erase was about to remind her exactly who he was. Because grief and patience combined can be more powerful than anger. And revenge doesn't start with shouting. It starts with strategy. And I was ready. After weeks of watching Samantha quietly take control, I realized one thing: patience was my only weapon. Every move she made, every confident claim of, "This is mine now," was leaving a trace. And I knew exactly how to follow it. My mornings began the same way. Coffee in hand, sitting in the corner of the kitchen she had tried to claim as her domain. I observed. I listened. Every word, every tone, every glance. It was all information. All ammunition. Samantha was clever. She knew how to manipulate perception. Friends, relatives, even neighbors started seeing me as too old to manage the house. I let them think that. I stayed calm. I smiled. I said nothing. Because when people underestimate you, they show their real selves. One afternoon, she came to me with a smug smile. "Uncle Robert," she said, "I think it's time you let go of certain responsibilities. You're only making things harder." I looked at her calmly, letting the words sink in. Then I said softly, "Making things harder? Or showing you the truth?" Her smile faltered. Just slightly. But I noticed. Over the next few days, I started reclaiming my space subtly. Moved back my chair in the study. Placed my books exactly where they belong. Rearranged my belongings in small ways that Samantha would notice but couldn't immediately challenge. She tried to argue once. "Dad, maybe you should let me handle this," she said, her voice tight. "I'm handling it," I replied. "Just not on your terms." Her frustration grew with every calm response of mine. Every small act of reclamation. Every glance that reminded her I was still here. I started spending time in Helen's old study, looking through items she had kept, small notes, photographs, little things Samantha thought she could remove from the house. And I noticed a pattern. She had a habit of leaving items slightly out of place after rearranging. Files, old letters, even some of her mother's belongings. She wasn't thorough. Not perfect. Not careful enough. And that mistake was mine to exploit. I quietly began documenting everything. Not for threats, not for proof to anyone else. But to understand her methods, her timing, her weaknesses. Every overconfidence, every word she spoke thinking she was in control, I wrote down. Every move she made, every casual remark about replacing me, I noted. One evening she attempted something bold. She walked into the living room and said, "I think it's time we remove some of your things, Uncle Robert. We don't need so many reminders." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply smiled. "You might think that," I said softly. But some things can't be removed. Her brows furrowed. What do you mean? I mean memories. History. Effort. Things you can't just erase because you want control, I said. Her hands trembled slightly. I noticed it. That was the first crack in her confidence. From that moment, I began laying my groundwork. I spent nights going through my own belongings, organizing photographs, letters, keepsakes, all the proof of my place in this family, all the reminders that I was not just a visitor in this house. Samantha began noticing subtle things. My books were back on the shelves. Photos I thought she might have hidden reappeared. Items she had tried to claim as hers were quietly returned to their rightful places. She confronted me one afternoon. Why are you doing this? Why are you even trying? I looked at her calm, steady. Because some things are not yours to take. And some people are not yours to erase. Her anger was visible now. Real. Genuine. She had underestimated me completely. Over the next few weeks, I observed her behavior closely. She became reckless, overconfident, and increasingly frustrated by my calm. She tried inviting friends over to discuss how I wasn't handling the house properly. I let her talk. I stayed quiet. I observed. Every word she said, every suggestion she made, it was all evidence of her overreach, her arrogance. One night, I found a small stack of letters she had tried to hide. Notes from her friends, small gifts she wanted to move into the house as hers. I quietly relocated them back to where they belong. Not to punish, not to prove a point, but to remind her that this home was not hers to claim. Samantha's frustration was growing, but I kept calm. I watched her make mistakes, watched her pride and arrogance cloud her judgment. I remembered something Helen once told me. People who try to erase others usually reveal their true selves in the process. And that's exactly what happened. Samantha began speaking more sharply, commanding more boldly. She tried to push me out of my routines, my spaces, my own life. She thought silence would break me. It didn't. I began using subtle tactics. I left reminders of Helen around. Photos, letters, small trinkets, so that Samantha would see them and remember she couldn't fully erase my history, my presence, my family. Then one afternoon, she tried something bold. She rearranged the kitchen completely while I was out, placing her belongings everywhere and attempting to make the space feel like hers. I came home, took one look, and simply smiled. I moved things back carefully, placing each item exactly where it belonged. Every time she thought she could assert dominance, I quietly reminded her that she was not in control. She noticed. Oh, she noticed. Uncle Robert, why do you keep doing this? She snapped one evening, her voice tense. I looked at her calmly. Because I'm not finished yet. And because kindness is not weakness. Her anger grew. She shouted, tried to intimidate me, but I didn't respond with anger. I simply stood calm, steady, like I always had. She underestimated patience. She underestimated experience. She underestimated the man who had raised her like his own child. And that, I realized, was her biggest mistake. Every act of hers, every overconfidence, every manipulation, was now an opportunity for me to reclaim my place, my dignity, and my home. By the end of the week, Samantha's frustration had reached a tipping point. Her movements became sloppy, her words sharper, her confidence faltering. And I smiled. Because the little girl I raised like my own still had a father figure she couldn't erase. The first stage of my plan was complete. Observation. Patience. Waiting for her to make mistakes. The next stage? A subtle, quiet reclaiming of my home and my place in this family, without raising my voice, without threats, without anyone realizing it until it was too late. Because revenge, I had learned, is not loud. It is silent. It is strategic. And it is unforgettable. The next morning, Samantha's confidence was beginning to crack. But she didn't realize it yet. She came into the living room with that smug little smile she always wore. "Uncle Robert, I've decided we need to reorganize your study completely. It'll make everything more efficient." I looked at her calmly. A slow, deliberate smile formed on my face. "Efficient?" I said. "Or convenient for you?" Her eyes flickered, just for a moment. That's all I needed. Over the next few days, I began implementing subtle changes. Not in anger. Not with confrontation. Quiet, gentle moves that reminded Samantha, and the entire household, that this home had a history she could never erase. I returned photographs I knew she had tried to hide. Books that belonged in the study were quietly placed back on the shelves. Little items Helen had kept, the ones Samantha had started claiming as her own, were returned to their original spots. She noticed. "Why do you keep moving things back?" she asked one afternoon, her voice tight, controlled. I smiled faintly. "Because some things aren't yours to move." That evening, she tried to intimidate me in front of her friends. She brought them over under the guise of a friendly visit, to discuss decorating plans. She pointed at rooms and said, "This is going to be my area now." I let them talk. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I observed. Every word she said, every movement she made, it was all revealing. She didn't notice the small changes I had made in the background. Little reminders of Helen, little items that signaled my presence, my contribution, my history in this home. Her friends left confused. They saw my calmness. They saw my quiet confidence. And I could tell they were beginning to question her authority. Samantha tried again the next day. She rearranged the furniture in the living room, moving my favorite chair into a corner. She placed her belongings on tables I had always used. She thought she was asserting control. I walked into the room, glanced around slowly, and then quietly moved my chair back to its rightful place. I returned my books to their shelves. The small items she had placed on tables were carefully repositioned. She watched, eyes wide, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Why do you keep doing this?" she snapped. "Why do you care so much?" I looked at her, calm, steady. "Because history matters. Effort matters. Love matters. And some things cannot be erased." Over the next week, Samantha's behavior began to deteriorate. She became reckless. Overconfident one moment, frustrated the next. She was trying to assert control, but every calm, deliberate action I took was undermining her subtle manipulations. One evening, she came to me again, voice trembling slightly, though she tried to mask it with authority. "Uncle Robert, maybe you should step back. Let me handle things. You're too old to manage the house properly." I smiled softly. "Too old?" I asked. "Or too inexperienced to notice how much overconfidence can ruin control?" Her face paled slightly. She didn't respond. I spent the following nights preparing carefully. Every move Samantha made was being quietly countered. Every act of overreach was documented, not for court, not for anyone else, but for me. To understand her patterns, her weaknesses, her arrogance. I also started leaving subtle reminders around the house. Small things that Samantha couldn't ignore. Photographs of Helen and me together, little notes from Helen she had written, keepsakes that proved my history, my care, my presence. She began noticing these things. And with every observation, her confidence cracked a little more. Then came the moment she made the first real mistake. She decided to throw a small party in the house, inviting a few of her friends and claiming the space as hers. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word. I simply observed. Every action she took that day. Moving furniture, claiming rooms, boasting about her control, was carefully noted by me. Every casual remark about how things would be different without me was added to my mental list. By the end of the party, Samantha was exhausted, frustrated, and just a little careless. It was exactly the opening I needed. The next morning, she tried to assert authority again. "Uncle Robert, I've decided you're not allowed in certain areas anymore. You'll have to follow my rules. I looked at her calm, steady. Rules? I asked. Or assumptions? Her hands trembled slightly. She tried to maintain control, but the cracks were visible now. She had underestimated patience, underestimated experience, underestimated the man who had raised her like his own child. I smiled faintly. You've made every mistake someone can make when they think control equals power. And you didn't even notice it. Her confusion grew. I could see it in her eyes. She was beginning to realize that her arrogance and overconfidence had been quietly undermined. Over the next few days, I began quietly reclaiming more of my space. I moved back personal items, photographs, and keepsakes that were hers now, but had belonged to Helen and me. Every subtle action reminded Samantha that the house was not hers to control, that I was not going anywhere, and that she could not erase the family that built it. Samantha grew increasingly agitated. Her words became sharper. Her gestures more desperate. She tried to manipulate the household, attempting to sway friends and relatives to her side. But by now, I had already begun influencing perception with my calm, quiet confidence. Her overconfidence became her weakness. Her manipulations became my advantage. Every act of trying to erase me was slowly turning against her. And then one evening, she made a small, careless error. She left a personal note, intended to assert her authority. Out in the open. I quietly read it, smiled, and tucked it away. Evidence of her arrogance, her overconfidence, her mistake. I realized then that I didn't need to confront her openly to win. I simply needed patience, observation, and subtle, careful reclamation. Samantha had underestimated me from the very start. She thought grief had made me weak. She thought she could erase a father figure she had grown up with. She thought love and patience were signs of weakness. She was wrong. I had begun reclaiming not just the physical space of the house, but my rightful place in the family. I had quietly undermined Samantha's attempts to dominate, all while remaining calm and composed. And she had no idea that every overreach, every boast, every careless act she made was quietly building the foundation for her own lesson. Because the little girl I raised like my own had no idea that the man she was trying to erase was far from powerless. And the best part? She hadn't even seen the full plan yet. Weeks passed, and Samantha's control of the house grew bolder. She walked through the rooms with the air of ownership, arranging, commanding, and deciding. Every corner she touched, she thought belonged to her. But she didn't see what I saw. I watched. I waited. And every confident gesture of hers only gave me more information. Every casual remark she made about my house now revealed the cracks in her arrogance. One morning, she came to me with a bright, triumphant smile. "Uncle Robert," she said, "I've decided the study is mine completely. You don't need to go there anymore." I looked at her steadily, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Completely?" I asked. "Or just mostly?" Her smile faltered for a second. "Just enough." I noticed. Over the next few days, Samantha became increasingly reckless. She overstepped, trying to assert dominance in ways she thought I wouldn't notice. She rearranged furniture, moved personal belongings, and even attempted to hide photographs and keepsakes she thought were hers now. I allowed it. I watched carefully. Each movement, each decision, each action, all of it was revealing more than she realized. Then came the day she made a fatal mistake. She decided to throw a small gathering of friends in the house. The idea was to assert authority. She wanted everyone to see that the home was now hers. I didn't confront her. I simply observed. Her overconfidence was palpable. She laughed too loudly, moved things too carelessly, and boasted openly about the house being hers. I noticed every detail. Every slip of pride. Every tiny misstep. That evening, after her friends left, she tried to confront me again. "Uncle Robert, why do you keep undermining me? Why do you care so much?" I looked at her, calm, unwavering. Because patience and love are not weakness, I said softly. And because some things cannot be claimed simply because you want them. Her face flushed. Anger mixed with confusion. She didn't understand that her every overreach was quietly setting the stage for what was coming. Over the next week, I began quietly returning the house to its rightful order. My chair was back in the study. My books, carefully placed. Photographs returned. Keepsakes Helen and I had treasured, subtly repositioned. Samantha noticed. She tried to argue. Tried to stop me. Tried to assert dominance. But every time she raised her voice, I remained calm. Every time she tried to manipulate the environment, I adjusted quietly, subtly, deliberately. Her arrogance was turning into frustration. She was losing the quiet control she thought she had. Then came the moment of realization for her. She had tried to hide a small collection of notes from me, letters, photographs, little gifts she thought could symbolically claim her authority. I quietly restored them to their rightful places. The look on her face when she saw them was priceless. Shock, disbelief, and anger all at once. You moved them back?" she whispered, incredulous. "I always do," I said. "Some things cannot be erased." Her overconfidence was crumbling. I noticed that she was beginning to make careless mistakes. Sloppiness in her movements, harsh words she couldn't take back, arrogance that made her predictable. I had been documenting every single act, mentally, carefully, watching, observing, waiting. It was now clear. Samantha had underestimated the man she had grown up with. She had thought grief made me weak. She had thought patience meant surrender. She had thought love meant submission. She was wrong. I began preparing small, subtle reminders of Helen around the house. Photographs, keepsakes, letters, tiny, powerful symbols of the life we had built together. Samantha noticed each one, her frustration growing. She tried to confront me again, demanding answers, demanding control, demanding acknowledgement of her authority. I looked at her, calm, and said, "Authority is earned, not taken." She was stunned. Over the next few days, I quietly reclaimed more space. Not by force. Not by yelling. But through subtle reminders and strategic placements. Items that belonged to Helen, reminders of shared memories, evidence of my contribution to the house and the family. They all quietly reminded Samantha that this home was not hers to claim. Her frustration grew, and with frustration came mistakes. Every misstep she made now strengthened my position. And then, the moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. Samantha tried to take complete control of the kitchen while I was out. She rearranged everything, claiming ownership. She didn't realize I had observed her pattern closely. I returned everything to its rightful place as soon as I walked in. She watched, trembling slightly, unable to control her emotions. "Why do you keep doing this?" she demanded. I smiled faintly. "Because some things are not yours to take. Some people are not yours to erase. And because patience is more powerful than arrogance." That was the turning point. Samantha's overconfidence had peaked, and now it became her greatest weakness. Every act of hers, every attempt to erase me, had quietly strengthened my position. I was reclaiming not just the home, but my rightful place in this family. And she had no idea. Because she had underestimated patience, wisdom, and love. The little girl I had raised like my own had no idea the man she was trying to erase was about to teach her a lesson she would never forget. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, and the house felt calm. Too calm. Samantha walked in, smiling with that smug confidence she had worn for weeks. "Uncle Robert," she said, "I think it's time we finally admit, you're not really needed here anymore. This house is mine now." I looked at her calmly. A quiet smile played on my lips. "Mine?" I asked softly. "Or only yours in your imagination?" Her smile faltered for just a moment. That was all I needed. Weeks of patience, observation, and subtle moves had led to this moment. Samantha had made every mistake imaginable: overconfidence, arrogance, carelessness. And I had quietly exploited each one. I began walking through the house, slowly, deliberately. Every photograph I restored, every keepsake I repositioned, every little reminder of Helen and me, everything had been placed to show that this home, this family, could not be erased so easily. She watched me. Her hands trembled slightly. Her carefully constructed facade of control was starting to crack. "You've been moving things back," she said, her voice tight, controlled, but with an edge of panic. "I have," I said softly. "Because some things, some people, cannot be taken away. And some things, some people, cannot be replaced." Her eyes widened. I continued, calm, steady, and deliberate. "Do you remember how I raised you? How I was always there? Every scraped knee, every tear, every victory, I shared it with you. I loved you like my own daughter. And that love does not vanish just because someone decides it's convenient to ignore it." Samantha's shoulders stiffened. She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. I moved closer to the living room, where the furniture had been rearranged and some of my personal items placed carelessly. With quiet precision, I returned each item to its rightful place, restoring order. Every movement I made reminded Samantha, without a word spoken, that the house and the family had deep roots she could not uproot. "Why are you doing this?" she finally whispered, almost to herself. I looked at her, calm and unwavering. "Because love is stronger than arrogance. Because patience is stronger than force. And because the truth always comes out in the end." Samantha tried again to assert dominance, raising her voice, gesturing wildly, calling friends to her side. But I stayed calm. Quiet. Steady. And then it happened. The first sign that my plan, the quiet, subtle reclamation of my home and place in this family, had succeeded. Her friends began noticing the little things. The photographs she had tried to hide, the keepsakes she claimed, the items she placed without permission. Slowly, quietly, they began to see the truth. Samantha's carefully constructed world began to crumble around her. One evening, she confronted me directly, desperation clear in her voice. "Uncle Robert! Why won't you let me take over? Why do you keep undoing everything I do?" I smiled faintly. "Because some things are bigger than control. Some things are built with love, and they cannot be erased by arrogance or greed." She glared at me, realizing for the first time that she had underestimated me. Every act of hers, every attempt to erase me, had quietly worked against her. I finally revealed the final piece of my plan. I had quietly moved Helen's letters, our shared memories, the photographs and keepsakes I had meticulously restored, to a place where everyone in the family could see. Not just Samantha, but our relatives, friends, and neighbors who had begun visiting. She realized too late. Her overconfidence, her attempts to dominate, her arrogance, all had backfired. You planned all this?" she stammered. "I observed," I said softly. "I waited. I acted carefully. I let arrogance show its true face. And now, the truth is clear to everyone." Samantha's anger and disbelief were palpable. She had tried to erase me from this family. Tried to replace me. Tried to claim everything as hers. And yet, through quiet patience, careful observation, and subtle reclamation, I had turned her own arrogance into her undoing. The household, once confused and swayed by her boldness, now saw the reality. My place was not just restored, it had been reinforced. Every act of manipulation she had made was quietly exposed by the calm, deliberate moves I had orchestrated. Samantha's eyes filled with tears. Not just from anger, but from the sudden realization of how completely she had miscalculated. I looked at her and said softly, almost tenderly, "I raised you like my own daughter. I loved you like my own. But love does not mean letting someone destroy everything in its name." She was silent. Finally, the arrogance, the overconfidence, the manipulation, all of it had come crashing down. I stepped closer calmly. You can still be part of this family. But respect, patience, and understanding. Those are not optional. They are earned. And they are remembered. Samantha swallowed hard. She nodded, slowly. The tension in her shoulders began to ease, the realization dawning on her. For the first time in weeks, the house felt like home again. Not because I had fought, not because I had shouted, but because patience, strategy, and love had quietly restored order. I sat down in the study, my favorite chair back in its rightful place. Samantha watched from across the room, quiet, thoughtful, no words left to challenge. And I knew, finally, that the lesson had been learned. That the little girl I had raised like my own had no idea how strong, how patient, how determined the man she was trying to erase could be. The house was mine, not because I fought, not because I demanded it, but because truth, love, and careful observation always win in the end. Samantha had tried to erase me. She had tried to replace me. And yet, in the quiet, subtle way that only patience can achieve, I had reclaimed everything. And I knew deep down that she would never forget this lesson. Because some things, some people, cannot be erased.